Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Finally, after a season plus of having a pretty monotonous, pretty stale meta here in Warzone, the assault rifle meta is extremely competitive here in season 2. Thanks to various different buffs and nerfs that we've seen throughout season 2 so far, breaking down a top 5 genuinely is pretty difficult to definitively say, hey, this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But that said, today I'm gonna try my best to give you guys the 5 most competitive rifles possible. So first up here, we got to break down some stats. We are here on the COD community page, which uses a mix of true game data stats and then also their own weights depending on, what they value the most with their TTKs, but it's still accurate graphs across the board, right? And so here we have a handful of the top rifles. We're gonna plug some in, plug some out as we talk about them. First and foremost, the AK-47, probably one of the more difficult rifles to use, but it's still full auto at the end of the day. It's only difficult because it's got some larger visual recoil and a larger recoil pattern than some of these other choices, but it hits like a truck. As you can see, the orange line here, I mean, throughout. First, damage range is insane. It ends up being the best TTK in the mid-range, and then all the way out to 76 meters, basically, insanely fast TTK. If you stack this thing up with recoil-based attachments, it's still going to melt. It's just going to take some more time to get used to than some other choices, but there is a bit of a skill gap there. But overall, it's an incredible rifle. The AMES is feeling pretty good as well. Its first damage range isn't anything too crazy, but then its second damage range, you get into the 50-meter range and then beyond. For long range, it's actually really consistent too. It's incredibly low recoil, very aggressive as well. It's one that certainly is worth noting. The Cypher is another pretty fun one. It does drop off a little bit earlier than some other choices here, but nonetheless, it's still an incredibly easy to use weapon, really good for sniper support, like in that mid-range. If you extend the damage range out to 50 meters, 60 meters even, which is going to be a lot of realistic gunfights that you're going to be taking. Pretty competitive, all things considered. The Goblin is a weird one, our teal one here, because in theory, you look at this and it's like, oh yeah, that's clearly the fastest TTK. But it is semi-auto, which means it's probably the highest skill gap weapon on the list here today. And while it is still very consistent throughout, you have to be spamming it at its fire rate cap basically throughout to reach a TTK this fast, and you have to be incredibly accurate while doing so, which the vast majority of players ultimately will not be able to achieve consistently. Maybe in one fight here and there, but a lot of the times that might be a player's downfall, not being able to keep up with the fire rate fast enough. So this TTK here ends up dropping off a cliff, and then something like an AK, an AMES, a Cypher, whatever, can end up outgunning the player because they can't spam it fast enough while maintaining accuracy. So the Goblin is one that has so much potential in the right hands, but also could be really just not great in other hands. The Model L, probably the most consistent one. We've talked about this one a lot lately, just through the mid-range to the long range. It's fantastic. And the Krig is as well, surprisingly good. Now, that said, I know you might be asking about maybe the XM4, since that, of course, was like a top option. If we go ahead and we drop out the Goblin, we plug in the XM4 instead. If I go through, type this in, we'll remove the attachments off just to have like a bare, straight-up preview on this, right? The XM4, you can see, really falls flat everywhere. Close range, mid-range, long range, not really doing anything all of that great. So something like that's fallen off a cliff. The Goblin, higher skill gap. I think truly you look at the top 5, there are some other close competitors for sure. Like the AS Val is there for sure. It's like maybe an honorable mention, but between the AK, the AMES, the Cypher, the Model L, and the Krig, I think you have 5 rifles that are incredibly dependable, easy to use, and consistent throughout. So focusing on the actual setups for these top rifles. Now, first up here with the Krig, I love the feel of this thing. It is very low recoil, decently aggressive as well. And as we saw, its TTK throughout is incredibly consistent. Depending on where you're landing your shots, whether it be upper body, if you hit some limbs, it could adjust your TTK some, but this is going to be a very dependable rifle as mentioned here. There's a couple of different ways you could build this out. For optics, it's really a matter of preference. I like the Jason Armory 2 times a lot. The Willis 3 times is right up there as well for some of my favorites, but if there's a different one you like more, by all means, feel free to go ahead and run that. Suppressor on here just keeps me off the radar. Very straightforward, of course. I do like running a barrel on here where I can reinforce is pretty beneficial. Upping our max damage range to 56 there, essentially. Then also getting a 978 velocity is pretty important there. Without that, obviously, you could, adjust to a long barrel, get an even better damage range, but a lower velocity. You could use something like overpressured if you had gunfighter on, but typically you want to extend out that range where you can. Vertical foregrip here gives us the max horizontal control, making the weapon a lot more predictable and easy to use. If you're focused more on like the mid-range, you could also try something like Ranger if you wanted to. Then extended 2 here is a 70 round extended mag. That works fantastic for all squad sizes. As mentioned with gunfighter, I think there's an applicable build here too. If you wanted to stack overpressured with a long barrel for max range and max velocity, that's viable. Recoil springs for even better control, throwing that on there with a stock like balanced, an ergonomic ergonomic rear grip or something like that could really highlight this weapon as well. But even with just 5 attachments, the thing is great. Now the AK-74, as mentioned, insane TTK potential. This thing has the chance to be the most powerful dominant rifle in the category. It's just much more difficult to use than everything else here in the top 5, right? So with this, you definitely got to load up on recoil based attachments and then really master that recoil pattern. It takes some time to do, but you can absolutely do it, and the weapon will pay off for sure. Like, you absolutely can get rewarded by using this thing if you put the time in. So again, I like the 2 times optic, 3 times works well as well for me. Compensator here over a suppressor if you really want to go all in on control, especially with just 5 attachments on here. That's obviously pretty important. If you were loading up with 8, you could use recoil springs and then still rock a suppressor and get decent control, or even go even more in on control and rock a compensator, an underbarrel like we will, and recoil springs if you were interested there. Reinforced barrel yet again, 70 meter effective damage range, almost 1,000 velocity. That works fantastic. Vertical foregrip as mentioned for the max horizontal control. Stack recoil on here for the 8th attachment if you wanted to with gunfighter, and you're getting even more control out of that. And then extended 2 works fine for me with a 50 rounder. Extended 3 with 60 is also an option if you're okay with being a tad bit slower there. But 5 attachments works great here. 8 with another rear grip, a stock, and then as mentioned, recoil springs could also be a fantastic build too, as we've discussed previously. But yeah, the AK, one of my personal favorites, but definitely a bit higher skill gap compared to the other weapons on this list. And by the way, as we are breaking down all the setups here, if you enjoy the video, a like rating is always seriously appreciated. Much love to everyone who takes the time to do so. And if you're new to the channel, you want to guarantee that on a daily basis, you're always in the know for everything going on in COD. This is the best place to be, so feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. Next up, the Cypher. This thing can be built in a lot of different ways, and all of them you'll find success with. I really like it for more of like a sniper support hybrid style aggressive build. If you want to go for long range, it's practical there too, because it is so low recoil and so easy to use. You can definitely build it out depending on your playstyle preference, but I think, like I said, it's so good as like a sniper support style weapon. So I do go for an iron sight build here. I think it's pretty clean. Suppressor keeps me off the radar, straightforward there. Long barrel extends out that damage range to 56.9 meters, fantastic. 810 velocity will work for sniper support. Obviously, if you're focused more on long range, going over to a reinforced to up that velocity might be more your style there, or using overpressured ammo or something like that, right? Ranger foregrip, some mobility there with the sprinting movement speed, but then also some horizontal control, so the weapon's easier to use still. Extended 2, here's 60. That'll work just fine for all squad sizes. Then for a sniper support build, I like balanced stock as well, just for some better movement outright. If you wanted more of a long range based build, you may want to use an optic, so you could swap out that stock for whatever optic you're comfortable with. If you wanted to stack gunfighter on here, again, throw on an optic, throw on a rear grip, throw on recoil springs or overpressured, whatever you want to focus on there. But yeah, the Cypher, just so easy to use that you can pick this thing up and just fry with it, really regardless of what the build is. The AMES is just so straightforward. This is another case where it doesn't really matter what your skill level is. You can pick this thing up and you'll probably find success with it, because it is a point and shoot rifle. It's just that straightforward, that easy. The entry barrier is very low here, but it has decent rewards from it. It's TTK, it's damage range, all of that is fantastic, and it's a pretty aggressive rifle, all things considered, with its movement and everything, which I like as well. So again, I got the 3 times optic here, no surprise. Suppressor on here as well. Reinforced in this case gives us an almost 56 meter effective damage range and a 931 velocity, so that's going to work fine for all the realistic fights here yet again. Ranger foregrip in this case, just because, one, it's decently easy to use, so you don't need max control like the vertical foregrip offers. You're still getting some though, and that's always good. Plus, sprinting movement speed on an already aggressive weapon just makes it more versatile, so I really like the feel of that. Then extended 2 will be a 60 rounder here with the 750 RPM. You're going to burn through ammo, but you're going to be burning through ammo on players because it's so easy to use. You're going to hit shots consistently, so not a huge concern there. Again, a gun that can benefit from gunfighter. Throw on a rear grip, stock, overpressured, recoil springs. You'll be good to go here as well. AMES is one of my new favorite weapons as of late. And then ultimately the Model L, definitely my favorite rifle as it stands. Whether you're using a gunfighter build or just a basic 5 attachment build like this one, it's reliable. It hits hard, it's got great range, great TTK, and still very easy to use as well in terms of control and everything. I just love the feel of this thing. So again, 2 times optic, 3 times optic, whatever you want to rock there. Suppressor keeps me off the radar. Reinforced barrel, 71 meter effective damage range. That's insane for not even being the best long range barrel. And then you get up over 1,000 velocity for that too. Like, that's such a no-brainer for me. Vertical foregrip, max recoil control makes the weapon incredibly easy to use. And then extended 2 is going to be 50 here with this fire rate of 600. You're not going to have to worry about running out of ammo there. You could throw on ergonomic, a balanced stock, recoil springs are overpressured here too, and you get an even more versatile version of the Model L that already is incredibly dominant. really, you can't go wrong with any of these rifles. And as I mentioned earlier, you could also use something like a Goblin and AS Val, other options that are right there as well. So the AR category in general right now is extremely competitive, and ultimately that's great news. That is going to wrap things up though. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be seriously appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, you want to guarantee that every single day you're in the know for everything going on in Call of Duty, feel free to hit that subscribe button. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.